spend time alone. Get to know yourself, do things by yourself. And yeah, sometimes for some people it might be hella uncomfortable. I recognize and acknowledge that, but it's in those places of discomfort that you're able to really hear that voice that you have inside your head.
Let's start this thing, Paul. Hello, I'm Sam.
And I'm Amelia.
Welcome back to Ask the Duo podcast where we aim to build a better mindset for better relationships.
Yeah, and this week on relationships, we're going to be discussing how to have a better relationship with ourselves.
Yes, and we've said this numerous times in our previous episodes. It's easy for us to see others have a poor relationship with themselves. But with us, we're all about changing that mindset to improve that.
Yeah, and in this episode, we really want to hone down on why do we think that when it comes to ourselves, it's harder for us to actually have a better relationship with ourselves, and we seem to talk down on ourselves a bit more and have a bit more of negative talk. So we really wanted to discuss this with someone special all the way from Thailand, Jen Trinh.
Hello, Jen.
Welcome.
Hi guys, how are you?
Good.
Before we get into all this deep conversation, did you want to give our listeners a little bit about yourself?
Yeah, my name is Jen, and I'm originally from Sydney, but I'm based out here in Bangkok, Thailand. Yeah, I started off as a teacher, so I've been in education for 10 years now, and I recently transitioned into, running my own soul-led business in coaching, counseling, and human design as well.
Yeah, that's really, really cool. We really wanted to have you join us and talk about human designs and how that also helps better your relationship with yourself too. So really looking forward to get through and talk about that towards the end of the episode as well.
Amazing. Looking forward to this chat, actually.
Yeah. So before we get started, how do we define having better relationship with ourselves? Like, how do we each individually define this?
Yeah, for sure. I think it's different for everyone, right? Like naturally. And for me personally, having a good relationship with myself means the self talk. Because a lot of the times in our head, the inner critic and how we perceive ourselves and how we relate to ourselves can be negative, and then this is due to many factors, from past experiences and whatnot. And so, in my opinion, the relationship to self is best cultivated within. It's like an inner thing. It's not an external thing. A lot of people think self-care, taking yourself to get a facial or whatever is self-love and having a good relationship with yourself. But I think it's a lot deeper than that. It's something that you have to cultivate and grow, just like any other relationship.
Yeah, I definitely agree with that. And I think it's not about if you're having a good day or a bad day or, if you're having challenges and things, but it's all really down to listening to how you're talking to yourself during these situations. And if you're having more negative talk than something positive, even on challenging days, you can still have positive talk. And I think that's how you understand or define if you have a good relationship with yourself.
Damn. I was going to say the same thing, and I agree. The only difference is for me, self-reflection is a big thing as well, because you need to understand who you are, what you are, but also what you're facing as well. Those thoughts, whether it's positive, negative, and being able to direct that energy from that point.
I love that. Yeah.
I think all three of us is something that's within, like you say, like self-care that does help it or could help you relax. But if you haven't worked on your inner work, it's not, in the end, in the long run, it's not really going to solve the inner talk.
Yeah, that's a good point. But why do we think that? How do we treat as humans?
What do you say?
Wait, hang on. Brain block. Why do we think as humans we treat others not as clearly or better than ourselves?
You mean like why do we as humans can easily encourage others to treat themselves better and have better self-talk, but when it comes to ourselves, why do you think that we don't treat ourselves as good as we treat friends or
Yeah.
colleagues or families?
I think a lot of the times we are our harshest critics, right? In ourselves, like internally, we have such high expectations of not those around us, but for ourselves. And we hold our values very high, right? And so we measure ourselves against our own values and expectations. We don't do that to other people because I think as humans, we intrinsically know, oh, that's not fair to be putting like measuring others against our own metrics, but it's very common practice for us to do that to ourselves. Like, for example, when you're in school, you get a score and everybody's like, oh, that's such a great mark, out of 100. But like, you're sitting there like, no, this is not it. A great mark is like, I don't know, 90 plus or something, and
Mm,
85 doesn't scratch, but 85 like generally is a great mark. And so I do feel that we just hold ourselves to a certain standard, and that's why we're a lot harsher on ourselves.
yeah, and like how you're doing compared to, how you think you are, everything's all relative, right? Like it's just perspective, really. And one of our recent podcast guests has also said it's like it's easy for you to spectate, but when you put yourself in the lens, it's really hard to watch and hard for you to spectate. And I think that's really true in this case.
Yeah. It's human nature, right, to make that comparison to others at times. It's always harsher on us rather than others. And that's why we always can encourage others too, because we see it better for them rather than ourselves.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And I think it's also hard for us, particularly being like upbringing in an Asian
Yeah.
culture. You're always
Mm-hmm.
compared to others, always
Mm-hmm.
need to be doing the best, and like that's how we grew up. So it's like unless you're the best of the best, you're
Mm-hmm.
nothing.
Yeah.
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 And I don't know, I recently was talking to my friend about this thing, but that inner voice that we have, that inner critic, who do you hear? Because I recently had an epiphany that the inner voice I hear in my head is like my dad's voice, what my dad would say to me. So obviously, growing up, he had a huge impact on me and raising me, and a lot of the structures and values I have, came from him as well. So in those moments where I'm highly critical of myself, I now realize, oh no, that's my dad's voice in
Mm,
my head. Do you guys have that?
that's a really good question. I think when I hear it, it really is my own voice, but when I want to think back about it, it's because if my parents were watching over me doing my homework, it's more like they're questioning, do you think that's the best you can do? And that's when
Mhm.
I'm in my own head being like, am I doing my best? I don't know. So I think I do hear my own voice, but it's like a secondary thought that comes from that question, are you doing your best?
Mhm.
Mm,
Mhm.
Yeah, it's a little different for me. I think my family upbringing, my parents were never the ones that drilled me. It was always the people around, like the family friends, the uncles, the aunties. They were the ones that would always like, oh, why aren't you like this guy? Why can't you be A plus student or be so studious and you're such a bad child? Like they
so do you
always,
hear their voices in your head?
yeah. I always remember their voices in the background. I'd be like, shit, like I got to be like this person.
That's actually
Mm.
really interesting now that you think about it.
Yeah, and it's like I mean, it's not trauma like in the psychotherapy world we would call it childhood trauma, but it's not like trauma is just not like an accident or an incident. It's more of something that impacted you
Mm,
in the past, right? And these incidences where we had these people over our shoulder like speaking to us that way had impacted our child mind. You know what I mean?
mm.
And we carry that. So I'm sure we all have these experiences throughout our whole lives where we have had that same voice just in different situations say, oh, you're not doing enough, like why aren't you trying harder? No, that's not the way to do it, there's a better way.
Yeah, that is really, really true. But in terms of thinking back into your journey and things that you've experienced, do you think there's one point where you really didn't have a good relationship with yourself?
Oh, that's a really good question. I think like most people, like when you're a teenager, that kind of phase in your life where you're like confused about who you are and where you're at, and there's so many external influence plus like hormones. I think then I didn't have a good relationship to myself, and even in my early 20s as well, because like those were formative years in like discovering who you are, what you like, what you don't like, and forming your identity as an adult. So I think during that period, I was maybe like self-abandoning myself in situations and people pleasing as well, and just not really grounded in who I was back then. What about you guys?
Mine's quite similar, also like the early 20s and stuff. I would say mine, if I was thinking about teenager, childhood, those kind of situations, I was actually quite confident and like just didn't really think too much about things. I think it's just once you get into the bigger world and then you're seeing a lot of things being compared or people talking about certain things, that's when you start thinking about, oh, am I good enough, or like, am I doing things right, and things like that. But one particular moment that I always share that I really didn't have a good self talk with myself was my fitness journey when I really got into it. I got into dieting. So I started weightlifting. First 2, 3 years, I was fine. I was just eating whatever I want, didn't really care, worked out. But then I got into a point where I was really, really into it. So I started researching like how to improve and do all that kind of stuff. And during that time, social media and fitness was such a big thing. And it's always just seeing posts of people and girls that have like amazing bodies, chiseled abs, and like, all these toned arms, and you're like, wow, I would love to be like that. So it's like, how do I get a body like that? So it just got deeper and deeper and deeper, and it turned into under eating, overworking out, and then always wanting to look like people who don't even have the same body frame as me, because me as a female, I do have a wider body frame, bigger body frame, and I can't compare my body to someone who doesn't have the same thing. And just going into that rabbit hole and just really just talking down on myself and being like, why can't I ever get to that point? And I never got to the core of like just understanding my body itself and what it does, because everyone's body works and functions differently. So it's just understanding that, and being happy and truly being happy about your own body rather than looking at someone else.
I love that.
Yeah. Similar, but on the flip side. So where I really had a poor relationship with myself was more during work. So in my earlier times of banking and finance, there was a moment where I did have a lot of self-doubt on myself, just in terms of my skill set. So this is something that we briefly spoke about in a previous episode, imposter syndrome. So one of the biggest things for me was just measuring myself on my competence and the speed of execution. So with obviously being in banking, it's very knowledge-based. It's all about understanding how to do things strategically as well as just being in the tool, so experience. So for me, I always measured myself against speed, being able to execute quickly, but having the knowledge behind that as well. And I always used to doubt myself about, am I knowledgeable enough? Can I continue to build and grow? And I always had those thoughts in my mind, like, oh, I'm doing shit. I'm not fast enough. This is not good enough, and I got to a point where, yeah, that was a real problem for me. Yeah.
I think another one for me that's quite a big one, that's always something that's in the back of my mind, is a lot less quieter now, but I don't know why I always had this big either imposter syndrome or self-doubt sort of thing. I always feared or just told myself that I'm not good enough to talk to other people. So if for example, if it's like a boss or someone who had a lot of knowledge or someone's well known, I would tell myself that I'm not worthy to go up and talk to someone because I'm like, I don't share the same knowledge. I might be too boring. I'm not intelligent enough. And yeah, I always just held myself back, even if I had like a dying question, just to like pick their brains and stuff like that. So I think this podcast did help in terms of just reaching out to people, talking to them, and just get to know each other. And you just soon realize that a lot of people are just really happy to talk, no matter if they're, really well known or they're not well known, just getting started in a business or whatever it is. Everyone's just human, right? So it's just getting out of that fear.
I love that you guys shared like specific incidences or stories where you've had like not a negative relationship to yourself, but like a developing one. When you guys were speaking, something distinctively came to me, and I was like, oh, I think this is worth sharing. And I think for a lot of my life, I didn't share this aspect because it was more of like really personal. But I feel like in relationships with the opposite sex, that's when I found, or it was reflected back to me, that I had a poor relationship with myself. And that's why I said earlier, that idea of like when you self-abandon yourself and you people please the other for the other person, or you do things that they want to do, and you're not really honoring yourself in those moments. For me, that's where it came up the most when I'm in relationship with someone.
Yeah, like just trying to change yourself to suit the other person.
Now I look back at it and I'm like, oh wow, you didn't love yourself then. You didn't value yourself enough to realize that you don't have to shapeshift in that way.
Was it out of a fear that they might not like you if you showed your true self?
For sure, for sure. It's like and even making assumptions about who you think they would like, and then you kind of like being that person that you think that they would like. You know what I mean? And yeah, it's out of deep fear of like rejection, or like them not accepting you for your authentic self. I mean, there are many, many factors, but I think, yeah, to the core, it would have been that, like a fear of like rejection.
Yeah, I feel like that's quite common too, especially maybe your first few relationships too, when you're still learning about yourself and trying to be as a couple with someone else as well. It's kind of a learning progress.
For sure. And in like that kind of container, it's where it's reflected back at you the most. I don't know, maybe you guys can attest to this because, you guys have been together, married and all of that. It's like, how like in the container of a relationship, like, it's, do you guys find that a lot of your relationship wounds, like I'm not enough, or like rejection, abandonment, all those things, right? Love wounds, like, do they come up in this container of a relationship?
In terms of conversation, like do we talk about it or something
Like
happens?
triggers, like emotional triggers, and they kind of.
I think it does. Like it definitely comes up, and then I was actually listening to another podcast recently. It's called Rise and Conquer, and the founder was talking to her husband and doing like those relationship questions things, and they were saying a lot of the times when things come up, like arguments and things like that, or something that triggers you, it's really something that you felt to yourself, or something that didn't fulfill yourself. For example, if you felt like that partner didn't give you enough attention at that certain point in time, and it's really something that you haven't worked in on yourself sometimes. And when they talked about it in that angle, I actually think it's kind of true. And when things trigger, it's really less of what the other person did, and it's just more like, something inside of you that you haven't really worked on that also shows up as someone was doing something, and it kind of merged together, and then in that point in time, that situation looked like someone did something, but it's really yourself.
Yeah, that's why I feel like sometimes the relationship, like a partnership that you're in, is such a space for you to like grow your relationship to yourself, right? Because it forces you to meet these things that you haven't worked on, that you've kind of like maybe swept under the rug, and then in this container it keeps coming up, and like it kind of helps you refine your relationship. So I guess my question to you guys is, do you feel that like it's like refined your relationship with yourself having been together?
Yeah, I was going to say what you said about the container and how your issues come up, and that's when it's a good time where you work together. I see it as a positive as well. I see it like it's a moment where you, like a relationship is an agreement, right? So you're in a partnership, and that point is to work with each other. So I see it as a benefit from a partnership perspective, but an individual perspective as well, because it forces you to be uncomfortable, but it forces you to learn from, I guess, the arguments or the disagreements and whatnot. So overall, it positions you to be a better person.
Yeah, and the sooner that you actually face and talk about these problems, and provided you're talking about it respectfully, the less you have it later on. It's kind of like, it's a weird analogy, but it's like, brushing your hair, right? If you have a massive knot and you just kind of leave it, it's just going to get knottier and knottier. And as you're trying to brush through it, it's just going to hurt. It's going to, take forever to undo. But if you just slowly brush it from like down, slowly unknot all the tangles, and over time, it's just easier to brush your hair. And it's the same thing with problems.
Oh, I love that analogy. I might steal that.
Feel free to.
Makes lots of sense.
Yeah.
Yeah, so on that, was there any sort of turning points that you had in the past, just in terms of
forcing you in terms of really realizing and making you have better relationship with yourself?
Yeah, like I said earlier, I guess in my early 20s, seeing my interactions and relationships with other people, not so much friends, but in like romantic relationships. And then I found that they were toxic for me, and I didn't realize that at the time. And they put me in places where I felt like I was like rejecting myself, and not accepting myself and abandoning myself. So those were times where just at a point where I was like, okay, I'm done. I don't want to feel that way anymore. And what can I actively do to stop myself from feeling that way? Like putting myself in that position where that is the result.
Yeah. For you in future relationships, you set more boundaries, like lay things out a bit more clearly so that people have an understanding of what you want, what you don't want.
Yeah, for sure. But it also was like for me a process of taking a step back and being like, right, like why am I doing this? What's the root cause of this? Like, why is this like a repeated pattern of behavior or like emotional behavior as well? That's like a narrative that's going on repeat. How do I like stop that and like interject there? So personally, I know like when I was like 20, how old was I? Like maybe 27, 28, I just took a lot of time off from dating and just like really focused on myself. I was already traveling a lot, but I traveled even more like just on my own and got really deep in my meditation practice and just like was with myself a lot.
Nice.
And then I was like, you fall in love with yourself again. And when you love yourself, you just don't tolerate anything else, and that's when the boundaries come in. You're like, well, no, this is not a loving act towards myself. So that was my process of how I like just kind of, healed that or stepped away from that kind of negative mindset.
Yeah. I think for me, in terms of the diet situation, it was just getting to the point where you, like, I think deep down I already knew that it was kind of a problem. I was feeling so tired, always getting sick, and then like getting to a point where you're kind of realizing that you can't keep doing this, because if my true purpose was to really get fit, get healthier, these are counterintuitive. Like I'm not getting fitter, I'm not getting healthier because I'm getting sick all the time. And it's like it gets to a point where you just need to have a look at yourself and just look at what you're doing and kind of remind yourself what you're doing it for. And that's kind of like one of the turning points. And in terms of having that fear or thinking I'm not good enough in terms of talking to other people, the turning point was really over time, because I think another thing is from upbringing, always being compared to other people. Over time, I think I just started tuning out that comparative thought in my head and like from other people. And it's just going out there and really, because I do have that drive to get to know someone or do have that curiosity to just know more about something, I just went out there and listened more on my curiosity thoughts than my thought of being like, oh, they might think I'm boring, or they'll be like, why are you asking that stupid question? And then just going out there, and that was just my turning point, because over time, as you kind of mature, as you kind of grow, you can't keep holding yourself back, and you just got to go out there and do things. And I think nature of my job and also just the things that I do, it just got me out there, and the more you practice on it, the easier it gets.
Yeah, and for me, it was self-reflection. I think that was the biggest thing, just knowing who you are, what's happening around you. That was the biggest turning point. I mean, with the work situation, it was kind of getting to the point where it's like, okay, you got all these negative thoughts. What's the point? It's not really getting me anywhere. So that's, like I said, the self-reflection came in and understanding me as a person. And that's when, over time, journeys, you have a lot of experience, you get more confident in yourself. So I got to the point where it's just like, yeah, ignore those feelings or the thoughts. And look, even to this day, I still have those thoughts randomly, but it's just reminding yourself, hey, keep moving forward and just keep moving on.
Yeah, and one of the things that one of our guests also said, it's like also remembering no matter what you're doing, this applies to any industry, whatever situation you're in, there's always going to be someone that's better than you, but there are always going to be other people that aren't as good as you, but you can't compare yourself or put yourself in that kind of criteria because there's no one size fit all criteria and everyone's different as well. So I think that was a really good perspective.
Yeah.
I love that you mentioned that comparison thing because we're always like, we're so unique. You know what I mean? There's only one Amelia, there's only one Sam. Maybe the person who sits next to you in the office does the same job, but you guys have such different ways of approaching it. And this applies to all of us. And a lot of the times, society has conditioned us to make us feel like we should be this one thing. Like if you're like a banker, this is what like a banker should be able to do or look like or speak like or whatever. And I find that just honing down and grounding down on actually how unique you are and the different facets of what you bring to the table that the person next to you does not bring. They have something else they bring to the table, and really celebrating what you have
Yeah.
and just being like, okay, this is how I'm authentic, how I'm different, and this is what I bring. And accepting that, but also loving that that's the case.
Yeah, no, it's really true. And I think that ties in really well about your human design thing because it shows someone could be, exactly the same, maybe born on the same day, and work in the same industry, whatever, but like their charts are all different and the energy flow and all that. And that also goes into things that are, your personality, your character, things like that. Those are all different. And you might have different ways that you prefer things done or prefer certain things, and that all influences how you are as a person. But from all these experiences and things that we've figured out that triggers our unhealthy talk or unhealthy relationship with ourselves, do you have some certain cues for people who may not even understand if they're having a good or a bad relationship with themselves? Like what are some cues that they could have a look at in terms of just understanding themselves a bit more?
That's a really great question, actually, and would be really useful. My first point of call is like tapping into your body, because when we feel bad, we're like overthinking it a lot of the time. We're trying to make sense of it, put reason into it in our minds so that it makes sense to us. But I find the body to be like a highly, like it's always speaking to us. So when we are feeling tension, when we're feeling not good or when we're feeling down and not healthy, like you were saying earlier, that's your emotional body and possibly your psychological body telling you, hey, something's not right in us. Something's not congruent here and in flow, and it's showing up in our body. And that's when you can kind of work backwards to be like, okay, obviously something's wrong. What is it that's wrong? Where's it coming from? And then trying to reflect and evaluate from there.
Yeah, I think it's also because I have seen a therapist before, and one thing that was really good is just asking why. Like, say you're sitting just thinking about a certain situation and you're feeling a certain way. It's like, why am I feeling this way? And then once you answer that, you ask why again. So you keep asking why and why and why until it actually digs all the way until the core and just be like, okay, so this is the true reason and it influences into how I feel this certain way. I think that's a really good exercise to do for anyone that is either just feeling down or feeling a certain way or feeling a bit lost. Is a good question to ask themselves.
Yeah, that's actually a pretty good theory of asking yourself the question why. Because I've actually tried that myself. I think because when you went to see someone for that, I actually tried that on myself. And it does make you question why. Why am I thinking this? Why am I feeling this? And it really gets you to dig deeper into the root cause. And that could be something really stupid, could be something that's really basic. But I think it's ultimately just understanding why you're thinking that.
Mm.
For me, like the one specific moment that I tried that was the moment that I was talking about before, when I'm thinking, doubting myself when it comes to work. You know what I mean? And it's just asking myself, why do I think that? And you said the exact same thing, Jen, about there's so many different bankers that do the same job, but they're unique in their own way. So it's just thinking from my perspective is like, okay, well, what's different about me compared to them?
Well, it's also like knowing that there are certain things that you're really good at, and then there are some other things that other people who are also a banker who do really well, and like maybe they bring in a lot of clients, but you're really good at writing your loans and getting the deal settled. That so there's all these different things,
Yeah.
and just realizing that.
And like just going off that example, it's like a deep acceptance, accepting that, okay, that's not my area of strength. That's okay. I'm going to work on that. But this is my area of strength. For example, writing the loans, right? I'm going to celebrate this. I'm going to sing this, and I'm going to allow this to be my, I guess, unique selling point. And that's what makes me unique and what makes me a good banker. So I really love that.
Well, from that, like as we've kind of touched on a few times, human design, before we get into that in terms of how that is useful in terms of building better relationship, did you want to give our listeners a little bit about what it is and what you do in human design?
For sure. So human design is a very new system. So if you think of tools like Myers-Briggs, Enneagram, and all that sort of stuff, it's not that, but it's a system of understanding yourself better. So with Myers-Briggs, it's, they ask you a whole host of questions and it kind of calculates your archetype. Whereas human design is based on your birth data. So your time of birth, your place of birth, and your date of birth. And it marries different systems. So the systems that they marry together, or human design marries together, astrology, the Chinese I Ching, the Hindu chakra system, the Kabbalistic tree of life, and quantum physics. And it's kind of layered on top of one another. And using your birth data, it calculates the planetary alignments in the universe on the time and place that you were born. So, and it turns out this blueprint, it's of you, and no one else has this blueprint. It's literally like a map, a roadmap of your energetic body. And so what I do is I basically use that to help people understand themselves better. And yeah, a lot of the times I find that people fall in love with their uniqueness. Things that they thought were like, oh, I'm too emotional. Oh, I'm too straightforward. People don't like that about me. I'm not sure if I like that about myself. But it allows them to see themselves and they're like, oh, wow, this is what makes me unique. This is how I stand out. And I love that about myself.
Yeah, that's really cool.
Yeah.
And I think it's really good because in terms of you may kind of have some sort of feeling knowing that maybe you're very emotional or like you're too straightforward, but understanding why you do that or what's the thing that makes you feel or think a certain way, that's really interesting. And when you did ours just before, it definitely is interesting. And the one where you're saying that I have that emotional wave, and if I do make decisions during an emotional situation, I don't make the best decisions, and it's best to wait it out and wait till I'm neutral and make a decision on that. That's like one good example of how you can understand yourself better.
A lot of people think that the things that they think are their weaknesses, like I'm too emotional, I'm too much, I'm too indecisive, I'm too fast to take action, whatever it is. Some people think that these are their weakness, but actually, it's their superpower. Like Amelia, your superpower are your emotions. You have a capacity, like a high EQ, really high EQ as a result of the emotional wave because you've seen the spectrum of emotions. You've felt it before.
Yeah.
Right? That's your superpower, your emotional authority. Whereas Sam, your superpower are your instincts, your immediate in the moment instincts. And maybe in the past, it may have led you, to make impulsive decisions, I'd say. But actually that to its like highest form, it's your superpower. You're good at that. Whereas like Amelia and I might take ages to make a decision,
Yeah.
Sam, you're just like bang in. I know what I want. I know how to go forward.
Which is also really true because I also found that I can read the room or read someone's emotion really well, like just by like, and then just talking to them or seeing their body language, and I just know exactly how they're feeling. And it's not just like the surface level feeling. It's not like they're sad, they're happy. It's like they're sad because they're uncomfortable with this certain thing, or this person did something they're not feeling comfortable. And I somehow can just read that. And people, when I'm like, oh, I feel like that person over there is feeling sad because of that, and they're like, oh, really? I didn't really notice. And like, I don't know why. I just feel like I can
Yeah.
just read that really well. So that's
Mhm.
really interesting.
You
Yeah,
got
I'm sure you have these
superpowers.
emotional, yeah, it's
Mind
your
reading.
superpower. You have the emotional vocabulary for
Mm,
that. Whereas someone like myself and Sam, we're just like happy, sad, oh yeah, that they're not well today or whatever. Whereas you put color to it, you know,
yeah.
you can name each where they are on the spectrum. And not many people can do that. And that makes you highly empathetic to the other person because you can see where they're at deeply. Whereas maybe Sam and I were just like, oh yeah, that they're not in a good mood. Cool. Like we respect that.
Yeah. I think I also translate through into what I was saying before, where I over considerate. Like I'm over considerate in terms of thinking I'm wasting someone's time or like I feel bad.
Yeah.
But that's just because I'm thinking 2 steps ahead. Like if I'm talking too much, they're like, okay, this person's talking too much, asking too many questions, and I have things to do, and it's just like it translates into things like that. So understanding that is really helpful.
And like with human design, like all these aspects have like a gift state, which is like the highest form, the light state. And then they have a shadow state, which is like the darker side, and what you were just speaking about, Amelia, is like the gift of like having this emotional authority is you're highly empathetic. But the curse of it, the darker side of it, is like you can be too much sympathetic or empathetic to them, and then you kind of sacrifice yourself and what you need at that given moment. So it's about deeply understanding yourself and playing with the nuance of that.
Yeah. Yeah. Definitely really, really interesting.
Yeah, that's awesome. We did a little bit of research as well, just
Yeah.
to try and understand, but we did read there was a section that was talking about energy types. So what does
Mm.
energy types mean for people?
Or the different
Oh, I
types
love
of
that.
energy types.
Yeah,
Yeah.
so the energy type refers to your aura, like your frequency, your vibration. And in human design, there are 5 different energy types, and these energy types have names to them, right? And the energy type is not just a name, it actually talks about what your aura looks like. So the first one are manifestors. Okay, they have a closed and repelling aura, right? They make up 9% of the human population. The second type, projectors. So, Sam, you and I are projectors. We make up 20% of the population, and we have a focused and absorbing aura. So, our aura is focused, really direct. You would resonate with this, and it's really absorbing of the external world and of others, right? Then we have our generators. They make up 70% of the human population, and their aura is open and enveloping. So they've got a really open and inviting aura. And a subsect of the generators are manifesting generators. That's what you are, Amelia, right? So you have a really open and enveloping aura. So when people are around you, they just
That's
feel
really
like
cool.
you're ready to receive them and give them a big warm hug because you take them in, right? And you guys make up 70% of the human population. And then there are reflectors, which make up 1%, and their aura is like completely blank. So they're one. I've never met a reflector before, so they've got a very unique aura. But in terms of your guys's aura, could you resonate or relate to the fact that, Sam, you have a very focused and absorbing aura? So when you're with people, places, you're really like your aura goes out. It goes out, and it kind of like when people are around you, they feel really seen.
From my perspective, I think it's really true because he has this, I don't know how to explain that. When he's just talking to people, talking to crowds, or he can get into the conversation really easily and people just start talking to him and he can just make friends like on the spot, or people are just really friendly on the spot. And like when I see that, I'm just like, wow, how do you do that? So I think in that sense, I can see it.
I'm just trying to think back. Yeah, I mean, I think your observation is quite accurate there. Yeah, it is true. I think when it comes to like a social setting, it is easier for me to have that banter and to just jump in and talk to people, meet people, whether it's like a uncomfortable situation or a comfortable situation. But there are times where I can be not as comfortable and I'm like, nah, fuck that. I'll just
Mm.
stick to my
But
own.
I think even if you're really quiet, though, it's just like something about your aura. People will still kind of gravitate towards you and like want to start a conversation or something. Like, yeah, even though you're sitting by yourself or you're eating alone, it's not saying like, go away, I don't want to talk to you. Like, you still have that aura where people are like, oh, hey, what are you up to? Like, what are you doing? And I feel like that's what I can feel from.
I love that because, projectors and your particular aura, it's not inwards, it's going outwards and it's about the other. So, Sam, in a social situation, his aura naturally is very giving to the other. And people around love that. We all love talking about ourselves. We all love, everything about ourselves. So, people, when they're around you, Sam, they're like, oh, wow, I want to talk to this person because they make me feel seen. It's not
Mm.
about what you say, it's how you make them feel, right?
Yeah.
And because your aura is so like direct towards them in a conversation, they feel really seen and received, like I was saying before we jumped on, by you, right? And they're like, okay, wow. If I want to feel good about myself, or if I want, I will go to Sam because he sees me, right?
Mm.
Whereas Amelia, you're like this open light and you're just like, you don't have to do anything actually. You're like a magnet. Things just come into your aura and you get to respond to that. So you don't even have to, you can sit there, people, places, opportunities will come to you and your job is to just say yes or no to them. Super simple.
Hey, look at that.
Is that true? I don't know.
It's a trust exercise. A lot of
Yeah.
people who are generators or manifestors with this aura type, sometimes they've been conditioned to be distrustful of what's coming to them and what's right for them.
Yeah.
But actually, by design, your aura is like a magnet. Things will just come to you. It's an exercise of being patient and then responding to which one's right for you.
I think
Yes or
that's
no.
that's really interesting, and especially when you bring up trust. I'm a very skeptical person and always thinking this is too good to be true kind of thing. So maybe that's the thing that's kind of pushing it away. So that's really
Mm.
interesting.
Yeah, that there's definitely a science to that, when they talk about the law of attraction, but when we don't trust the universe, but deeply, it's more about trusting. We're not trusting ourselves, right? We're not trusting that we have the capacity. We're not trusting that we are good enough to have that opportunity come to us, right? And so when you're in deep, deep, deep trust, you're like a knowing that, yeah, I am going to be able to take a year off to figure myself out. I'm going to have a better job opportunity come to me. I just got to be patient. What's for me will come. The moment you tap into that,
Yeah.
I trust you, and I trust that things are just going to come to you, and you're going to be sitting there like, I don't even know what to say yes to now.
Yeah, that's really interesting because in terms of also work too, within the last few years, there have been people that reached out and like you're saying that the patience things or even acting on emotion. I think it's a bit of that because I'm like, oh, if I don't reply, maybe they won't talk to me ever again, or if I don't reply, I'll lose this opportunity. And it's like
Mm.
rushing into that and being like, maybe I do need to say yes just because I don't want to lose that opportunity. No one's going to ask me ever again. So, yeah, I think that's really accurate in a way.
Oh, I love that insight. You're already noticing or experimenting, not even knowing that you're doing that
Mm.
already. So as a manifesting generator for your aura type, it's to respond. You need to wait till that opportunity comes and then you get to respond to it. And before we started recording, you were like, oh, I just know. Sometimes I just know yes or no. And that's actually in your alignment. Your body already tells you, Amelia, hell yes or F no. And you already know that. And anytime you're convincing yourself otherwise, or your feelings are confusing you, that's when it gets a bit blurry. But you know, your body knows it's a yes or no for you.
Yeah, like I've already got an answer deep down, but sometimes the
Yeah,
thoughts kind of cover it. Yeah, that's really
for
true.
sure. For sure.
Overthinking.
Yeah. What about you, Sam? How do you go with initiating projects and stuff? Do you find that a lot of the opportunities that are sustainable and for you they come in way of invitations? Like people have invited you, they saw your talent, they saw your skills, and they were like, Sam, we want you on this project, or Sam, we've got this role that we think you're good for, versus you initiating I think I'm good for that role. I'm gonna apply for it.
Lately, I've been blessed in terms of people approaching me with opportunity. So, yeah, when someone does come to me, I just go, okay, tell me what it is. because I need to understand what the role is or what's the deal. There's got to be a catch, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I like to hear out. I like to talk to them. I still like to have that rapport, that relationship with the person. And then if I know, okay, this is not for me, then I just tell them. I'll be like, okay, this is no. I tell them straight away. I don't stuff around. I would just give them that answer. And if it was me on the flip side, if I was to go out and look for opportunity, I just talk to anyone. It doesn't really matter. I'll just try and contact them, build the rapport first, because I'm a really big person on rapport. I don't like just contacting someone just for the sake of a benefit that's from me. I want to build that relationship with the person first, and then I'll be like, okay, hey, is there any opportunity from this, or can we work together? And I find that when I do that, there are opportunities. And obviously there are times where there is no opportunity. But I find, most times or most cases, it's people coming to me and saying, hey, man, we've got this for you.
Hot tip for your energy type. When the opportunities or invitations are coming, you know you're in your life alignment or you're on the right path. When they're not coming and you have to go out and chase those opportunities, that's when it's like not in your alignment, because of this focus aura I was talking about. In some situations, like it can be really intense for the other party to receive. And so as a result, like that's why our strategy as projectors is to wait for the invitation, because our aura is really intense. So we have to back off a little bit, right? And then when those opportunities are coming to us, it's the universe, or energetically, it's because people see and recognize, yo, Sam's got what we need. He's got the skills. He's like the missing link. Let us go and fetch him. And that's when I'm sure you feel so much better when people are coming to you with opportunities versus you going out and having to chase these opportunities.
That's good advice. Thank you.
Yeah. I mean, experiment with it and let me know how it goes. It can be really confronting at first. You're like, wait, I'm not supposed to go and get what I want, because we're designed to do that. Like, we've been conditioned, right? But actually for our specific aura type, unluckily, like, you know, Amelia, she gets everything coming to her. We can't do that. We got to sit back a little bit, and the right ones will come. And I'm sure if you can look at not just in work examples, relationships, friendships, events, the ones where you were invited to were the ones that you probably had the most fun and was more in flow. And the ones where you initiated, whether they be relationships, work projects, or whatever, they kind of fizzled out.
That is really interesting. So for them or for you two as projectors, what is something that you can do to set up like an environment where you can get invited to a situation or a career or relationship?
Oh, I love that question. So good, so good. So I'm going to use a direct example, right? So, I mean, I've been following you guys maybe from when you guys started on my feed, and I was like, oh, damn, I really like them. I want to talk to them. You know, I had that in my mind from like back when I followed you guys, and I was like, I can't just interject and be like, dudes, I want to be in your podcast because you guys are cool. Like, that's like, I know that's not for my aura. You would have been like, who the hell is this person? Right? Why is she so like just inviting herself into our podcast like that?
Like, hell yeah.
Yeah, but I don't think it would have flowed or been in our alignment. But then like we would have conversations. I've seen you guys commented on my posts and stuff like that. And like there's a rapport building, right? I'm not fishing for anything, and I'm not like interjecting myself. I'm just like building a rapport and seeing if it works for me too. Because maybe I might not vibe with you guys, right? And then just having that conversation back and forth, and then like just trusting that, hey, if you guys really wanted me on your pod, you would ask me.
No, that actually makes sense, because I've actually tested that in the past. And that's why I said I'm a person that likes to build rapport over the intent. And I find that it works better for me if I go, hey, let's build a relationship, let's be a friend, or let's, do things together, rather than the whole business side of things.
Amazing. Yeah, that's totally in your alignment. And it's very important that you are seen and recognized. They need to see and recognize your talent, like what you bring to the table.
That's so interesting, because I actually feel like that is how you work, because a lot of the stuff is just through you talking to people, and then they're like, hey, like later on, like it's not straight away. Like, oh, I remember talking to you back during this time, and I feel like could really use your help or could really use your skill or something like that.
I love that. The reason why that's so is because your aura's open, right? So when they were in that interaction, they remember that, because people don't remember what you're saying to them. They don't care, right? They remember how you made them feel. And because of your open aura, you made them feel seen. You saw their business or whatever. You saw the situation that they were in, and they remember that. And they were like, right, that's our man, right? We want to work with him.
I love that. I feel like we could go on about this for forever, but let's go into 3 tips to help others understand themselves or have a better relationship with themselves, but not just that, like outside of what you were saying, like self-care and all that. How do we do that, or a tip for longevity?
3 tips. First one, spend time alone. Get to know yourself, do things by yourself. And yeah, sometimes for some people it might be hella uncomfortable. I recognize and acknowledge that, but it's in those places of discomfort that you're able to really hear that voice that you have inside your head, and you're able to really reflect, rehabilitate, or whatever it is, with that deep person inside of you, right? So lots of time alone to self. The second thing is listen to your body. I think we forget that a lot. We can overtrain, we can overeat, we can burn out, and our body's always signaling to us, hey, this is enough, but we don't know when enough's enough. So just checking in with your body, because it's always telling you, but we just kind of ignore it and think that, oh, it's not going to impact us, but actually it comes back to impact us, in our mental space, in our emotional space. So let's just stop it at the bud with the body. And the last one is give yourself grace. I think that's really important.
Yeah, I love that.
We've got to just stop being so hard on ourselves and understand the situation, understand what's happening, reflecting, like Sam said earlier, and just giving ourselves that grace that we would extend to other people. I think that's super, super, super important.
Yeah, I think it's just taking yourself out from the world and aligning yourself with other people. Is just remembering that you've done the best that you have in that point in time, and it really is just acknowledging all the efforts that you've done yourself. It doesn't matter what this person's done over there and that person did over there. Like, it's really just about you. And I think self-reflecting and being by yourself is really, really important, because that's the stuff that I've done ever since I was really young. So it's just, I really enjoy being by myself, and I think that is something that you're like,
there's a reason for that. Both of you guys, there's a reason for the love for alone time. There's an aspect in your chart called the hermit. It's like your archetype in human design. You guys actually have the same archetype. So you'll find that in your relationship, you feel like you're on the same wavelength or frequency, because you understand the deep need for being alone. Like, you like hermiting, both of you guys. Yeah.
That is definitely us. We are the hermits. Yeah, I think I've just been in that, just being by myself all my life, just being able to sit by myself and just I think from a very young age I've just learned how to self-reflect a lot, and I didn't know at a younger age that that's what self-reflecting is. And it's not thinking negative or positive, it's just thinking about situations. Why is this happening? Like, what can I do? And it's just that kind of thing. And then over time, as you mature, I just learn more and more in terms of how to self-reflect even better. So I really do enjoy time by myself.
Yeah, I see time by myself as a way to recharge my battery. Yeah, sometimes when you're out there, your battery gets drained, and sometimes it's just good to hibernate at home and just let myself recharge, essentially. So it's an imperative thing that I need in my routine.
And I think knowing that is good too, because some people may enjoy recharging, and they are actually in a social atmosphere and they like that. That's how they recharge. So it's just knowing those kind of things. So understanding that and that about yourself is what could help you have a better relationship with yourself too.
Well, thank you for joining us, Jen. We really did learn a lot about human design, and
I would love to actually learn more about this human design thing as well. It's really, really interesting.
I feel, the listeners will learn a lot from the information that you provided, as well as the chats about having an unhealthy relationship with yourself. And for the listeners out there, if there are any routines or techniques that you try at home, let us know in the comments.
Or anything that you resonated with us as well. But before we go, Jen, did you want to plug some of the things or places where people can find you, or websites, Instagram, socials, all that kind of stuff?
Yeah, I'm always open to chatting to people and sharing more knowledge. So you can find me at Instagram at Jen Trinh, TRINH.co. And that at the moment is my only platform and way of engaging with the outer world. So yeah.
Yeah. If anyone else want any human design reading, it definitely is so interesting. You can dig down so much, and just, I think anything to help have a better understanding about yourself will help you grow so much as well. So make sure you reach out to Jen for this if you are interested in doing any human designs. With that is our episode on how to have a better relationship with yourself. And once again, thank you so much, Jen.
Thank you for having me. Thank you so much.
That's it for today. Thank you for tuning in, and
Peace.
goodbye.
Bye.